Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. I'm Tom Hannafin, joined by StateCollege.com's Mike Poorman today to attempt to shed some light on all that has transpired with Penn State football over the last handful of weeks, and frankly, many years, considering what we have all witnessed as Penn State football fans. The loss to Iowa this past weekend, of course. Penn State is currently in a bye week. Its next opponent will be on the road at Columbus to face the Ohio State Buckeyes, where currently Penn State is a 17.5-point underdog, according to FanDuel, with an over-under of 47.5. So we'll get to that next week because I don't want to think about that. I think there's a lot of Penn State fans that also don't want to think about that noon kickoff on Fox. Let's talk about your experience, Mike, because you just got done attending the game at Iowa, the beginning of Terry Smith's time as the interim head coach, the beginning of the Ethan Grunkemeyer era at quarterback, a game where Terry Smith promised effort, grit, and toughness. We saw that. You just didn't see Penn State come out with the win. What was your experience like in Iowa City? What was your takeaway from the loss?
Iowa City is the quintessential Big Ten college town. I wrote a column, "They're Iowa nice." That's not the Iowa nice of the 2021 game. Certainly not that. But it's a bigger town than State College. Very welcoming. Not a lot of Penn State people there. And I have to tell you, on the field for the last few minutes, maybe not as loud at the whiteout at its loudest, but it was very close. It's among the loudest crowds I have heard, on the field. And I think at the end, that may have made a little bit difference, especially with Penn State's last drive. I mean, Ethan held up pretty well, but it was deafening and it was intimidating. And that stripe out, in some ways, is more intimidating than a whiteout. I'd be curious to see if someone like Ethan would say it was distracting, but it was a big league atmosphere. And Terry's promise came true. That team did not quit. Terry, you mentioned about you want to talk about Ohio State now. At the end of what I thought was one of the best, I've covered Penn State football for 47 years, one of the best, most honest, cogent, candid opening statement of 53 seconds by Terry I have ever heard. Mad respect for that guy. And at the end, he did mention getting ready for Ohio State, which you would never hear from any of his predecessors.
There's a lot of positivity to take away. I know there's a lot of negativity surrounding the program right now. 3-4. Penn State's not beaten a Power 4 opponent this year, in a year in which everybody expected Penn State to contend for the national championship. So I'm curious, considering your obligations in Iowa City, I don't know if you were able to catch what James Franklin had to say on ESPN's College Game Day. And also, are you in a circumstance now where you're putting the James Franklin era in the rear view?
Well, that's a really good question. I am trying to do that. 12 years is a long time, and I'm sure that's why part of the reason James went on Saturday was to get it out there and get it out there fast. I did not watch it live intentionally. I did read the transcript, and then I watched a recording of it. I thought the most interesting, the takeaway that a lot of people have is that, they asked what went wrong, and he said he didn't know. But twice, not once, but twice, he said he's going to win a national championship. And I thought that was so ironic because that was unprovoked. And then in July at the Big Ten Media Days in Vegas, and then in Beaver Stadium, the media day, which you've been to, James, again, unprovoked, both times said it's the best program personnel he's ever had at Penn State. So he wrote a check that created even higher expectations preseason. He did that himself. But then he goes on national television less than a week after he's fired, and he promises twice that he's going to win a national title. It's like, come on, James, didn't you learn anything? I found that most ironic out of the whole interview.
I respect the moxie, but there was a tone deafness. But again, that was PR more than anything. It felt like him on game day. The ESPN College Game Day panel took great care of him. You talked about this past summer, and there's a lot of stuff that's come out, expectedly so, after Franklin's firing. And we've heard from Nate Bauer from Blue White Illustrated. We've heard from our good buddy Landon Tengwall, who has a tremendous YouTube channel, the Landon Tengwall Show. I encourage people to check that out. And both of them have reported, allegedly, over the summer, James Franklin asked Pat Kraft for a contract extension. Whether Pat Kraft just outright said no or just declined, considering the time left on James's contract, I don't know the answer to that. But then the story, according to Landon Tengwall, is that James Franklin tried to go over Pat Kraft's head to other members of the administration. Does this ring true to you? Do you have any other information on what may or may not have transpired this summer with James Franklin's contract?
Yeah, that's true. And it fits a pattern. And what I'm saying is true because I have an amazing source who was in the room. When James got his last contract renewal, really after that COVID year and the next season, which ended up not ending well, Sandy Barber took a lot of heat, and so did Eric Barron. James got that huge extension. That was not from Sandy Barber. That was not from Eric Barron. It was from the board, the head of the board, that contract. So James, he had done that. That's how he got the last contract. So when Pat said no, James said, fine, I'm going to go over your head. And it worked once, but it didn't work. It didn't work twice. So part of my line that I've said, part of when Joe got fired, they fired Joe because they could. They finally could. And part of why they fired Joe is he lost all of his allies. And obviously there's a scandal part about it. But Joe was vulnerable. And James, with not one, not two, but three losses, was at his most vulnerable. And he had already gone behind the back of his boss. And if I'm Pat, I can say this is what I believe. If your number one employee goes behind your back, how are you going to work together for the next 6 years and trust that person? And then I think he had to do it if he was going to do it after Northwestern, because if James goes to Iowa City and wins with Grunk, Pat can't fire him. He can't do that. I know that just happened at Florida, but this—
I was just going to say, that was beyond bizarre.
Yeah, but James is not Billy Napier. He would have righted the ship. It would have been a big win. And not saying that, or if Pat had kept James and they win in Columbus, James would have a job for life, or at least till 2031, right? So to me, those things kind of explain to a degree. And then you throw in all the fire Franklins, but I think they throw in the degree and the timing of it all.
The influence of Pat Kraft on the football team has been evident ever since he took over, and you could see the ramp up in fundraising. Just Franklin had said it a number of times that if he had a request or a question, the answer was almost always yes from Pat Kraft and Dr. Ben Naputi, which that alignment ironically took him down, which he was desiring for all those years. He was talking about, oh, we have alignment. So I have some deeper questions that go many years back at this point, and I want to kind of tie it to the frustrations Penn State fans had in the Iowa game, and I think have had for a little over a year now, specifically with the offense. Whose idea was it to hire Andy Kotelnicki? James Franklin or Pat Kraft?
Well, I think I can't give you a definitive answer that I know is true, but it was James is one of James's. I'm going to quote James the rest of my life. It's a combination of things, Tom. We'll just leave it at that. From what I understand, it took both of them. They know, probably only the two of them know equal parts on who to fire Yursich, which led to the hiring. To me, that's the question: who decided to fire Yursich that led to Andy? I think that's it. Kind of a quick, interesting sidebar. At Northwestern, James had his Big Denny's menu out, and it sure looked to me like he was calling plays in a way that I had never seen. He's looking at his sheet, he's pointing, he's talking, he's signaling to the quarterback. He's next to the three student managers. One of us, Chrissy Cobbs, who's fabulous, is Duffy Cobbs' daughter, who's the student manager for the quarterbacks. I love storylines like that. So I think James was actively, and a source tells me that was true. I asked James, the last question James ever got at a Penn State press conference was me going, were you calling plays? And his answer was, well, no more than I have for the past 12 years. And I've talked to former offensive coordinators. I'm answering the question you didn't ask.
No, go for it.
That James did give the coordinators almost full carte blanche. I don't think that was happening the last couple of games, and I have at least one source to say that. Plus, I could see my own eyes. So, yeah. And here's the last thing: is that if James wasn't calling the plays, well, he should have been. So tell me, are you a liar? I should say this: James should have been calling the plays. So maybe he wasn't, but at that point, he kind of should have been, right? He's a former offensive coordinator,
former quarterback, so you can understand the confidence that comes with that, the conviction that comes with that.
Yeah.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
State of State, a Penn State football show, is presented by Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. Data brokers make a profit off your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details. This can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, and harassment. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. What do data brokers do? Your name, contact info, social security number, home address, even information about your family members could all be compiled by data brokers and sold online. I understand what it means to have an active and online presence, so privacy is extremely important to me. Have you ever been a victim of identity theft, harassment, doxing? If you haven't, you probably know someone who has. Delete Me can help. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners and viewers. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/pro and use the promo code PRO at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/pro and enter code PRO at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/pro, code PRO. Delete Me. Your personal data is yours again. Similar question with Jim Knowles. Was that Pat Kraft's idea or James Franklin's idea?
Well, you mean hiring a new well, they had to hire a new coordinator.
They had to hire a new coordinator, but it was very much at the 11th hour, and obviously the national championship game, Ohio State being involved in that, the fallout in Columbus,
They want
drag things out. But Knowles becoming available, and then the speed with which Penn State worked, the number that they met, I'm curious.
Knowles wasn't James's first choice. Danton Lynn from USC was his first choice. And Danton said no. Danton had just been at USC, I believe it was a year. Mm-hmm. His wife's from Southern California. He has 2 young children, and his wife's parents live nearby. I mean, it's, there's a certain balance of life there. And I'm a big Danton Lynn fan. He's 35, almost 36. But if Danton had said yes, and I wrote this the other day, if Danton had said yes, they wouldn't have hired Knowles. And I think they would have won one of those 3 games or one of those 4 games. Look, Knowles, and this is true, Knowles' defense is complicated. Justin does this much more than I do. It's complicated. It's a different, people are playing new positions. And then from what I see in practice, which is 2%, he's a hands-off guy. But what I do hear is he's a yeller. So if you're trying to learn and play fast, a new defense in stressful situations, we've had class together. I like to think I'm a pretty good teacher. I don't yell too much.
Not too much.
not too much. I think I yelled at you once or twice, but you turned out good, better than good. So Danton's younger. He would have related to the players more. He's what we call my business and near peer. They can see themselves in him. He's more soft spoken. He's in some ways the antithesis of Jim Knowles. Long answer, but yes. So they needed a defensive coordinator. Knowles wasn't getting the money he wanted. And the money, 2.75 Ohio State, 3.1 Penn State, is not that much more. Maybe it kind of been the love. And then, there were things between Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles too. That's well documented. And I've heard that from other people who know Larry Johnson. So big name hire, but you're coming in and trying to do it all in a hurry. I don't know, man. Obviously it didn't work.
There's a variety of different people who've covered the team that since James Franklin has been fired have spoken about a number of different things regarding player evaluations as well. And Justin deals with this quite extensively with LIG Sports Group, and obviously his stepfather now being the interim head coach. So that's why he's not a part of some of these conversations. We're looking forward to having him back at some point in the near future. But it's a situation where the evaluation of some of these players, you scratch your head on a little bit. And the transfer portal is something that I've heard a number of different Penn State media pundits bring up and say that James Franklin was not being terribly aggressive with the transfer portal. It was filling select needs. And I think we can look at Amari Campbell at linebacker. Had he not transferred from UNC,
Wow.
in the spring, summer, Penn State's defense, its linebacker core anyway, would be screwed at this point in time. But you really can't point to a lot of big splash, successful transfer portal acquisitions for Penn State outside of, I would say, Chop Robinson and Arnold Ebiketie. And you can probably surprise me with a few others I'm not remembering here, but it's sparse. So from your experience being around James once the transfer portal came around, what was that process like? Was that as apprehensive as it felt like from the outside?
That's a really great question. And unless you're in those staff meetings, there's no way of knowing for sure. But I think we can surmise some things based on what you did. What you said is the presser that was held in Pagula because the stadium was undergoing the renovation to roll out Jim Knowles was preceded by a presser with Pat Kraft. Pat Kraft said to the assembled media, "We're still in the market for a wide receiver." You had the athletic director say, "We're still shopping. We already bought 2, but we need more in our cart." So it's pretty easy to connect those dots of the AD telling the head coach, "Go get someone new." And so, but I think James's thought on culture, James's ability to run it back with everyone and not upset the locker room financially and team wise, I think that was the thinking. And then you look at James is huge on benchmarking. You look at what Michigan did 2 years ago, running it back with everybody. Ohio State last year, running it back with everybody. That was a model that worked. So I think that's it. I will say this. 3 different people in the last week who I really respect. Two connected to the program. One, a former longtime, not football coach at Penn State, but coach at Penn State. They all pointed out that this season, the focus was on goals, not process. If you had to say James's strength was process, right? 1-0, focus on the game in hand. All of a sudden, the focus is we're the best ever. And all the talk, once you start talking about goals, you forget the process, especially when it gets tight. So for me, I haven't written that yet, but I've heard it from enough people who are a lot smarter, who are coaches, who are part of the program, past and present, to say that. It's like, and it's anathema to what James is all about. So I guess I went beyond in answering your question. But yeah, the dollars and cents are crazy. And then if you're paying a ton of money for Nick, you want to try to get your ROI on that. The best thing Terry did on Saturday, 28 carries versus 6 carries. Like you and I would have done that weeks ago.
You're talking about Nick Singleton. Forgive me. I thought you were talking about Nick Saban there for a second.
Oh,
because
sorry.
Nick Saban, the clip of him from LSU years ago talking about process versus results is gone viral in lieu of Brian Kelly's struggles at LSU. And it's ironic that Nick Saban just said that James Franklin's firing was unfair on College Game Day. I've vehemently disagreed with that one, but
well, who's their agent? Who was standing in the back?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, you understand Jimmy Sexton's role. And another question I have for you.
Sexton's assistant, by the way, is a Penn Stater. I love that.
Is he? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Irony.
He used to work in football.
In regard to the Iowa game, it was also, I believe, the first time we saw significant snaps in the wide receiver core for Kobe Howard and Tysier Denmark. And you kind of talked about the separation in workload for Katron Allen and Nick Singleton in the Iowa game. I believe it was, 28 carries for Nick Singleton? For Katron Allen.
Yet.
Something like that. And then Nick Singleton in 6. And that had been something Penn State fans, I think, had noticed last year, that Katron was having more productivity, it was performing better. And then especially this year, once Stan Drayton got in the building, it seemed like Katron Allen just widened the gap between himself and Nick. But James Franklin and the offense stuck to their guns. We're going to split this 50-50. And then Franklin's out. Terry Smith is calling the shots. All of a sudden, boom, Katron gets more touches. Boom, in come Kobe Howard and Tysier Denmark, who had a ton of buzz during the offseason. So how much did James Franklin stick to his guns with his veterans and the guys who were loyal to him to a fault? And I don't know. I felt like we were past this era in college football where it was like, well, the seniors are going to play. And it's like, what happened to the era in like 2005 with my own broadcast colleague, Justin King and Derek Williams, where best player plays?
That's a great comp. I mean, those two guys changed they changed the team, the season, the legacy, but they were the best guys. I mean, James was loyal, and then you also, you know, if you're spending a lot of money on something and it's not, you know, you're not getting your ROI, you're going to maybe keep on forcing. I thought the neatest thing that Kobe Howard's tweet about stuck in traffic, but I'm here now is like, man, that kid gets it. And his catch for 14 yards was the longest catch. Eight of 15 completions had this in common. They all were made behind the line of scrimmage. Like, you don't need to bring in 3 high-paid receivers to make those catches. Mad props to Terry. I got to tell you, and I'm Terry is what a great decision by Pat. But Terry is honest. He's authentic. His opening statement hit on the core of everything. He's not BSing anybody. He cares. I saw him, tearing up after the game. But he is the real deal. And for me, this past week gave an insight on why Penn State cornerbacks are so good. It's like, he's a great guy, but he tells it like it is. For me, the hiring of Terry and just the way the past week he's dealt with the media, not pandering to the media, but being honest and not BSing. Mad respect for Terry. And I hope, and I think this will be the case, whoever comes in, they'll retain him as a coach, or if not, a trusted senior administrator for football. That guy is the real deal, man.
I sincerely hope Terry Smith gets a fair shot at becoming the full-time head coach. I sincerely doubt it. If you're trying to move on from 12 years of James Franklin, you need to look to the outside. I think that's ultimately what Pat Kraft will do. My final question to you, with your ear to the ground, statecollege.com, everything that you're doing and writing, who do you think is in the running right now? Who do you think is leading that chase in terms of Penn State's next head football coach?
I don't have a rabbit in the hat, but if you look at Pat's hiring history at Penn State, most of his big hires, even his little ones, they're all people he knows. People from Temple, people from BC, all kind of positions, coaching, staff, everything. They're from the Pat Kraft tree. So that leads us to role, although I just text someone I know today, and this is not, I don't even know if he's on a list. I didn't see him, but someone like Jeff Halfley, he was at BC with Pat. He's a D coordinator at Packers. Like, I think this is going to be, so that Matt makes sense to a degree. He has to win. You can't.
Yeah, that would help.
Yeah, you can't come into Beaver Stadium and lose to Penn State on your job interview. But I do think it's interesting that if you look at Pat's hiring, everyone from the head of the Nittany Lion Club to the baseball coach to the new women's lacrosse coach who was an assistant coach at BC when they won the national championship when Pat was there. Like Pat, Pat's all about those relationships. So I'm not saying not. The other thing is the really good coaches, the Lannings, the Kirbys, the Kiffins,
Sabins, Myers.
Well, yeah, but they're all from the Saban tree.
Mm-hmm.
They're all. So I have to do my homework and go, okay, who does Pat know? Like, who does he know?
Mm-hmm.
And then who's left? Who's for real possibly on the Saban tree? So that may shake out. That may bring me a few more people that I hadn't thought of. Joe Brady's not coming to Penn State. Come on. Neither is Urban. They're just not.
There's a lot of ideas that have been thrown out there that are fine ideas on paper in a blue sky situation, but what's practical and what's probable, that's a much slimmer margin. And I feel like only Pat Kraft really knows the answer to that. So.
Well, my line is, you have to look at the search committee. And on the search committee are Pat Kraft, Patrick Kraft, Dr. Patrick Kraft, Pat Kraft, PhD, Vice President of Athletics, Patrick Kraft. All those people were on the search committee, all of them. And they have one thing in common. They're Pat Kraft.
He is Mike Poorman from statecollege.com. Thank you so much for being my Penn State football father and therapist and mentor all these years. I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on here. This has been State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.